Pashivo Gauranga Gunera Nidhi Kotha Gele Pabo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachayane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so today is the disappearance day of Srila Narottama Dasa-Thakur Mahashaya. So I'm just going to speak about that. There's a lot to say. There's a lot of information about his life from several books, Bhakti Ratnakara. There's one book written by a disciple of Janava Mata, whose name is Nityananda Das, which is called Narottama Vilas, which is his whole life story, more or less. And then there's Prema Vilas by, who's Prema Vilas by again? Does anybody remember who Prema Vilas is by? I'm not remembering now. Anyhow, there's one book, Prema Vilas. Oh, sorry, Narahari Sarkar Thakur. yes, wrote Prema Vilas, and if I'm remembering correctly. And so there's information about him in there also. Prema Vilas is a book which is about many associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, yes, what I'm speaking is from basically those 3 books. So, Narottama Dasa-Thakur was not a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was born quite significantly after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Well, I should say he was born during his lifetime, during Mahaprabhu's lifetime, but only toward the end. And so he never got the personal association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu noted Narottama as somebody important in his pastimes. There's a story which is narrated that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu and many devotees were doing kirtan in Ramakeli, where Rupa and Sanatan lived at one point. And so they were there doing kirtan, and it's described that all of a sudden, just in the middle of the kirtan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he looked what must have been east toward the village of Khetri. And all of a sudden he started shouting. In the middle of the kirtan, he started shouting this name, Narottama, over and over and over again, just shouting and shouting and shouting, and crying also. And so all the devotees also perceived that in that kirtan, when Mahaprabhu was shouting that name, there was some increase in the ecstasy. There was some different mood which was introduced. And so, but of course at the same time, the devotees were talking amongst themselves and were wondering who Narottama is, because there was no associate of Mahaprabhu at that time who was named Narottama. So later, Nityananda Prabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke to Nityananda Prabhu, and he was crying very profusely. In fact, Nityananda Prabhu later described to some of the devotees that he felt like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going to give up his body. He had never seen him crying so profusely. So he explained that, we've come to this world to introduce Sankirtan and to, spread the holy name to everybody, to deliver, all of even the most fallen conditioned souls. But he said, I'm worried about the future. I want to make some arrangement by which this Sankirtan can continue in the future. And so he told Nityananda Prabhu, he said, I have this plan. There is an associate of mine who will take birth during my lifetime, named Narottama. And he'll take birth in the village of Khetri, and I'm going to go to the Padmavati, the Padma River, and I'm going to deposit my love. I'm going to deposit my prema there, give it to Padmavati Devi, so that she can eventually give it to Narottama. And so Nityananda Prabhu, not much you can say to that. He, just agreed. And so anyway, yes, things went on like that. So in this way, Narottama Dasa-Thakur, he took birth on the 6th hour of the Purnima. I guess now it's what is it? It was Krishna Paksha, so it's anyway. He took birth on Purnima, the 6th hour of Purnima in the month of Magh. And, today's his disappearance, not his appearance. But anyway, he took birth, 6th hour of the Purnima day in the month of Magh, to an aristocratic family. Krishnananda Datta was his father's name, and his mother's name was Narayani. And this was, of course, in Khetri, on the banks of the Padmavati. And so Krishnananda Datta and Narayani Devi were actually the king and queen of Khetri. So they were, a very affluent family, had a lot of money. And when Narottama was born, there was an astrologer present, of course, to do the chart and everything like that. And so, looking at his chart, he informed Krishnananda Datta that your son is an extremely pious person, and he'll inundate the entire world with love of God. So Krishnananda became, of course, very happy upon hearing this, and so did his wife. Previously to this, he had worshipped Shalagram, his Shalagram Shila, to obtain a son, and he was sitting one day and he heard like an Akashvani, like a voice from the sky, say that soon he'll receive a son who would. Actually, there he heard that his son would inundate the whole world with love of God. After telling this to his wife also narrated that she had had a dream. She said, this is very interesting because I just had a dream that a very effulgent personality exited your body and went into my body. So they took these to be very auspicious signs. And then the astrologer at the birth of Narottama Dasa-Thakur, of course he was just known as Narottama back then, confirmed that this is a very great personality, very pious personality, and he will do many great things. But he warned him about one thing. He said, this is a very auspicious occasion, you should be very happy, but just make sure that you keep him away from bodies of water and especially rivers. He warned him like that, which anyway will come up later. So anyway, some time passed and they were, the family was very happy. Narottama was like the talk of the town. He was like the cutest, most beautiful baby. And 6 months passed, and when he was 6 months old, they had this, samskar, the annaprashna samskar, the first grain ceremony where the baby is fed solid food for the first time, usually rice, sometimes sweet rice like that. So when they were carrying out the ceremony, they did the whole thing, and then they went to go feed Narottama the grains, but he refused. He wouldn't eat it. He was just a baby, but he refused to eat it. And then so that same astrologer said, of course they were a little bit worried, like, what's going on? Why isn't this baby eating? And that same astrologer who was at, his birth said, don't worry. This baby will only eat Vishnu Prasad. So if you offer this rice to Vishnu, then he'll eat it, no problem. And so they did, and Narottama ate the rice. And then from then on, Krishnananda said, in my family, nobody takes anything but Vishnu Prasad. Nobody's going to eat anything unless it's first offered to Vishnu. So that was like Narottama Dasa-Thakur's first act of preaching in this world when he was 6 months old. So as he grew up, of course, Krishnananda, he was very pious. He was a really pious person, pious ruler, pious king. And so he would invite sadhus and pundits to come speak, in his home. And Narottama Dasa-Thakur took very much took pleasure, in hearing all these narrations, especially, because they were in Bengal. They were in East Bengal or Bangladesh. He took great pleasure in hearing all these narrations about, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and other things also, Bhagavatam and all these different things. And he especially liked to hear and especially gravitated towards narrations about Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. Those were like his childhood heroes. They came to be his childhood heroes. So he liked to hear over and over again from all kinds of different people. And there was especially one, Krishna Das Babaji, who would come there, who was actually a personal associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he would narrate to Narottama his experiences with Mahaprabhu and with the Goswamis. And like this, he was something like a Shiksha Guru to Narottama, and he very much liked to hear about, all these associates. Once he heard about Raghunath Das Goswami, and his austerity and his sadhana and his all these different things, and he spoke to his father and mother also after hearing this narration. He said, what's the use of, we're supposed to be followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why are we living in such opulence? Why do we have this big, big house? Why do we eat all this nice, nice food? He's saying we should just run away to Vrindavan. He said, we just forget about all this stuff, And, Krishnananda kind of laughed it off. He said, anyway, it's my son. He's a young boy. And he told him, you don't have to renounce everything just to be a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can just be a nice king and serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that way. But Narottama was unrelenting. He pushed, actually, it's described. He kept pushing. He said, no. We have to renounce everything. We have to run away. We have to give it, we have to give this all up. And so anyway, his parents kind of laughed it off and just left it at that this is, just the talks of a young boy, kind of like Hiranyakashipu. Of course, Krishnananda was nothing like Hiranyakashipu, but kind of like Hiranyakashipu did with Prahlad when he spoke, about Krishna consciousness to him. So, Narottama also heard from Krishnadas Babaji about Srinivasa Acharya, and who was, quite a bit older than him. And he heard about Lokanath Goswami, who would eventually, we'll see, becomes his guru. And so like this, he took great pleasure in hearing. And his parents started to notice that although he was the prince of Keturi, he started to become quite indifferent to, life as a king or life as a prince, become indifferent to, the opulence that he was growing up with. And so his parents in different ways kind of tried to prevent him from hearing from Krishnadas Babaji. They would, they'd see him hearing or something from him. They'd see him speaking with him, and they'd call him for lunch, or they would say, hey, can you help me with this? So like this, they would kind of try to prevent him from hearing too much. But of course it was to no avail, because Narottama had such taste for hearing that he would always be hearing. He was always hearing something about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, always hearing something about especially the Goswamis. And so, seeing that their attempts were not doing much, his parents, when he was 12 years old, tried to kind of get him tied down in family life and started to arrange for his marriage. Which, of course, 12 years old is quite young to become married. But it seems to me that was because they were quite concerned for his staying at home, becoming a nice king of Keturi. And we'll see this as a theme with them. They're very, very attached to them. Narottama's parents were extremely attached to him. They had so much love for him. So, like that, they tried to arrange his marriage. They were, looking for suitable matches. But by this point, Narottama was only 12 years old, but he was just fed up already. He was just, he wanted nothing to do with home life, family life, what to speak of, living as a king or a prince. He was feeling like his home was a prison and he was trapped. And at that point, he resolved that I can't stay here anymore. He said, there's no way I can stay here anymore. I have to leave. So he decided that he wanted to go to Vrindavan and be with the Goswamis, be with Rupa and Sanatana. And at that point, one night he couldn't sleep. He was just so torn, in his mind. He couldn't handle being at home anymore. And so Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream. So Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream, and in this beautiful form, he had long, curly hair, and he was wearing, beautiful clothes, beautiful jewels, and he told him, he said, don't worry, I know that you want to leave. And he said, I similarly also want you to leave. He said, marriage will be troublesome for you, and I have many plans for you. For now, go to the Padmavati, and I have something for you there. And then after that, see if you can go to Vrindavan and take shelter of Lokanath Goswami. So, of course, he woke up immediately, and he was elated and very excited, and he decided that right then and there he would just run off to the Padmavati. And this is the middle of the night, of course, and he was just a young boy. So he ran off, went to the Padmavati, he offered his obeisances, he offered some prayers, and then he stepped in. And when he stepped in, before I say that, actually, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deposited his love and gave his love to Padmavati, she came out of the water in her personal form, and when he entered in, the water overflowed, the river overflowed beyond its bounds. And so eventually he told Padmavati Devi, he said, give this love. There's a person who will come here, a great Vaishnava will take birth, on your banks, and he'll come here and collect this love. And you'll know it's him because when he enters the water, you'll overflow again. And so when Narottama entered the water of the Padmavati, she overflowed. And he saw this golden boy. This golden boy appeared before him and then entered into his body. And then Padmavati Devi came, and she said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and deposited this love, and I've been holding it for a very long time. And she had the prema in a liquid form. And she said, so you're meant to take it. But she told him, she said, I wouldn't advise drinking it, because if you drink it, you'll become completely mad. And so Narottama, of course, took it and proceeded to drink it. And at that time, his complexion became golden, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's. So he took that and he turned golden, and he just became completely mad in ecstasy, just completely mad in ecstasy. At that time, he fainted, and he woke up to his mother and father who came there. Of course, they were absolutely devastated because they had realized that he had gone to the river like he wasn't supposed to. And so they were fearing that something horrible had happened. They found him unconscious. And so he woke up and he saw his mother, and the only thing he could do was just loudly chant the name of Gauranga. That's all he could do. He was just crying and rolling on the ground and yelling the name of Gauranga. So, of course, his parents were just, bewildered as to what happened to their son. Actually, at first it's described they didn't even recognize him because of his complexion. He had turned golden. They couldn't recognize him. So, they were very afraid, and they had no idea what was going on with him. And they took him home, and he was just crying all day, all night, just, mad in ecstasy for a long time, for weeks, actually, it's described. And his parents tried everything. His parents thought that there was something wrong with him, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mother, it's described, also thought that something was wrong with him, that he had some disorder. And so they tried a few different things. They tried an exorcism. They thought that he had been possessed by some ghost, so they tried an exorcism on him, and all kinds of different things. And then one Ayurvedic doctor, he suggested that it's a vata disorder, or disorder of wind in the body. And so he told the parents that bring a jackal, kill it, and then smear the oil on his body, and that should help him. And so they were, of course, prepared to do that, because at that point they were desperate to bring him back to normal. But Narottama, at that point, he hadn't really spoken much for, several weeks besides, I want to go to Vrindavan and chanting and, all these different things. But at that point he said, what are you doing? What is this? You're gonna, just because, I'm acting a little weird, you want to bring this jackal and you want to harm this poor animal and kill it and rub the oil on my body? And he, very sternly, he said, listen, there's nothing wrong with me. I have no disorder. This is not an illness. He said, the reason I'm acting like this is because I want to go to Vrindavan. And his mother especially at that point, became bereaved, completely bereaved. And neither of them could bear the thought of losing him. They had such affection for him. At that point, Narottama, he tried a different strategy similar to what Raghunath Das Goswami did, or what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das Goswami to do. He decided just to act normal. He decided just to be normal, be a nice, king or prince, and try to, quell his parents' concerns. And so he did. He did, and they were, he was acting very piously and very, responsibly in his position as a prince, the future king. And so one day the Jagirdara was like he basically owned the land, and there was a whole system in rural Bengal, Bengal previously, kind of like the feudal system, where you'd have a Jagirdar, and then he would give land, and then on that land, somebody would rule that land, and there would be a village there, but ultimately he was kind of in charge of it. So Krishnananda Datta was under this Jagirdar. And so the Jagirdar sent a horseman with a message that, the Jagirdar would like to meet Narottama and to give him some kind of special accolade for his responsibility and for his... One place it's also described that he heard about his unusual behavior and he wanted to meet him. That's another version I've heard. So, but nevertheless, he was summoned by the Jagirdar, and his parents, at that point, became extremely worried, became extremely fearful, because they didn't want to let him out of their sight, because they were thinking that the first chance he gets, he's going to leave. So, but anyway, Krishnananda was obliged, so he sent Narottama with this horseman. And Narottama realized, before he left, his mother told him that, please come back after 10 days. I beg of you, please come back. And when you come back, we'll arrange your marriage. Everything will be good. Don't worry. You don't have to be restless. And so Narottama, of course, had no plan on coming back. He realized that this was a very good chance to escape. So he did. He went with this horseman and with, whatever guards were with him. And one night, I think the first night when they had all fallen asleep, he realized that this was his chance, and he got up and he just started walking west, toward Vrindavan. And he was walking and walking and walking, and it's described that he walked for 2 or 3 days straight. And at that point, news had traveled to his parents that he had left. And his mother specifically it's described that she went out into the streets, and she was screaming and crying like a mad woman in separation from her son. Krishnananda felt like the whole world was, null and void, and everything was dark. So, like this, his parents were in extreme agony, and they paid a very large, because they had a lot of money, they paid a large sum of money to one person to send to send a group, a search party to go look for him. And this party eventually caught up with him, actually. And they found him there in the forest. Again, this is a 12-year-old boy. So he's a 12-year-old boy, and he's just there in the forest alone. He's got blisters all over his feet. He's covered in dirt. And, he's extremely exhausted. And these guards, finally caught up with him and said, what do you think you're doing? Your parents are completely, distraught, searching after you. They've sent us. So come on, let's go back. Let's go back to Khetri. Let's, sort this out. And Narottama told them, he said, how can you have the audacity to ask me to come back to Khetri? He said, if somebody wants to give their life to Krishna, somebody wants to give their life to God, and how can you be so ruthless? How can you be so cruel to, tear him away from that? And he gave the analogy, he said, just like, a chaste wife wants to jump into the funeral pyre of her husband. Her friends might discourage her. Say, oh, you don't have to do this, this is too much, it's not required. But he said, how can you expect me to come back? He said, I've given my life, I've given my mind, I've given my body, I've given my soul to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How can you ask me to leave? How can you ask me to just give it up? And so after speaking this way, the guards kind of thought about it for a second, and they, hearing a 12-year-old boy speak like this, they didn't really know what to say. And so they actually didn't say anything. And Narottama felt like he had convinced them. And so without saying anything, he just turned around and left. And the guards didn't follow. And so, they came and back to Khetri, and they reported, their failure to Krishnananda and to Narayani. And of course, they were just extremely distraught. Nevertheless, Narottama continued. He traveled for some more days, and eventually, he's a young boy. His body's not very strong, and so he collapsed. He collapsed under a tree. He couldn't, he wasn't eating. He was just walking, through the forest, basically, without stopping. And he collapsed, and he fainted. He was unconscious, and then he woke up. And this Brahmana boy was there, and he said, my father lives near here. He told me that he saw you, and he asked me to give you this milk, so that you could have something to eat. And so, this boy, he gave him this clay pot of milk, and he didn't drink it. He just fainted again. He was too exhausted. In his dream, while he was unconscious, Rupa and Sanatana appeared to him and told him to wake up. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just appeared to you and given you this milk. So, drink it and carry on to Vrindavan, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has some great plans for you. So it's described this vision was so vivid that Narottama could smell the scent coming from their body. It was like they had appeared before him. He saw them, and it's described that he could even smell them, interestingly enough. So he woke up, and he was, of course, very happy to have had the darshan of Rupa and Sanatana, his childhood heroes. And so he drank the milk, and upon drinking the milk, he was completely reinvigorated. His body was completely refreshed. And he had, sufficient energy, sufficient strength to continue. As he traveled, many people saw him and had different reactions to this 12-year-old, ascetic, just walking by himself. Some were, it's described that in Prema Vilas, some were thinking that, his parents must be so distraught. Some were saying, fie upon Providence for making this boy leave home, this beautiful young boy. And, some were, praising his renunciation, that at such a young age, it's amazing how renounced he is. And so along the way, people maintained him. They gave him food. They gave him water, things like that. As he traveled, because between East Bengal or Bangladesh and Vrindavan, you also have Varanasi, you have Prayag. And so as he went, he stopped in these places. He stopped at Varanasi, and there he met Chandrasekhar Acharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associate in Varanasi, one of three. And, he stayed there, and he stayed the night in his home and discussed with him, different things, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. He also visited the temples there in Varanasi, and then eventually went on his way. He went to Prayag and took bath at Prayag, and then continued on. And eventually he reached Mathura first. So he reached Mathura, and he realized, of course, that he was there, and he took bath at Vishram Ghat. So Vishram Ghat is where well, traditionally that's where Vrindavan Parikrama starts. It's the ghat where Krishna, after killing Kamsa, went to rest. So that's why it's called Vishram. Vishram means to rest or to sleep, but it means rest. So he sat there after taking bath in the Yamuna, and this Brahmana came. And this Brahmana saw, there's this 12-year-old boy. He's just sitting here on the bank of the Yamuna alone. His body's covered in, whatever. He's just wearing it's described that he was just wearing a kopin and a chadar. That's all he wore. He didn't wear any lower cloth at that time. So this Brahmana saw him and he brought him, some prasad. And he was a Vaishnava, this Brahmana. He brought him some prasad and some, other stuff. And he fed him. He fed this young boy and talked to him about, his life and this and that. And eventually, Narottama asked him, he said, so, how are things going in Vrindavan? How are Rupa and Sanatana? How are, all the 6 Goswamis? How is their writing going? And this Brahmana's heart was pierced upon hearing this, the inquiries of this young boy, because Rupa and Sanatana at that time had already left. Rupa and Sanatan, Kashishvara, Raghunath Bhatta, those 4 devotees, main devotees, had left already this world. But Narottama didn't know that. Narottama was thinking that he was going to go see Rupa and Sanatan. He was thinking that he was going to go, surrender at the feet of Rupa Goswami and, take shelter of him and receive instruction from him. So now he's finding out that Rupa and Sanatan had left. He had no idea. And so upon hearing this, he was just completely devastated. And he began crying and he began calling out their names, Rupa and Sanatana. And this Brahmana took him, of course, again, he was a young boy, he took him on his lap. And this Brahmana also was crying and he consoled him. And both of them, they spent the night there on Vishram, the banks of the Yamuna at Vishramaghat, just crying. Eventually, they both fell asleep. They fell asleep embracing. And that night, Rupa and Sanatan, Kashishvara, and Raghunath Bhatta appeared to Narottama Dasa-Thakur, and they all embraced him. And it's described, soaked them or bathed him with their tears. And they had blessed him. They spoke, some words to him and blessed him. And this Brahmana, also being very pious, being a very exalted Vaishnava, he also heard the talks between Narottama and these devotees. So he woke up, and they both woke up at that point, and they spoke for some time. And this Brahmana asked, please come stay in my home. I'd be very blessed to have you stay in my home, such an exalted devotee. But he said, listen, I'm here to see the Goswamis. Please, let me go. Give me your permission to go, see them and take shelter at their lotus feet. And so, he then took his leave. And meanwhile, when this was all happening, Jiva Goswami had a dream wherein Rupa Goswami appeared to him and told him that this very exalted devotee named Narottama has just made it to Vrindavan. And you should find him and you should present him to Lokanath Goswami, because this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire. So Jiva Goswami sent, some devotees to look for him, and they found him and brought him to Govindaji Mandir, where Jiva Goswami was staying. And upon taking darshan of Govindaji, Narottama fainted. He was just knocked out unconscious in ecstasy. And Jiva Goswami, seeing the nature of this very young boy's intense devotion to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to Krishna, he decided that right then and there he should present him to Lokanath Goswami. So he did so. He brought him there to Lokanath and petitioned him that this boy Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desires that this boy be under your shelter, that you initiate him please do so. And so they spoke for some time, Narottama and Lokanath. But Lokanath Goswami, after hearing, all that Narottama had been through, hearing that this golden boy had entered into his body, and all of these different things, he said, listen, what do you need me for? Also, Lokanath had taken a vow that he wouldn't accept any disciples. So he said, listen, what do you need me for? What do you need a guru for? The guru of the universe is residing within your body. I'm not sure what you even need me for. And so he said, anyway, also, everything is available. And, you have, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is residing in your body, and everything is available just by the chanting of the holy name. So he told him, just chant, and, everything will be revealed to you. So in that way, he refused. He refused to initiate Narottama. So he was, very distraught. He, didn't know what to make of this. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had told him to take shelter of Lokanath, but Lokanath was now refusing. So anyway, he was quite bewildered, but at that time, Jiva Goswami then introduced him to the other devotees who were there, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Krishnadas Kaviraj, Raghunath Das Goswami. He was introduced to all these devotees who were there in Vrindavan. This is really full. Anyhow. So yes, he introduced them to all these devotees. And Narottama got their blessings, got their, the dust of their lotus feet. And so like this. And then at that time also, he started studying in Vrindavan along with Srinivasacharya and Shyamananda Pandit, who were disciples of different gurus, but they were all studying under Jiva Goswami. Srinivasacharya was a disciple of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Shyamananda was a disciple of Sridhar Chaitanya. But they were all studying together under Jiva Goswami, who was, the main, philosophical acharya of philosophy. He had written the Sandarbhas, and he was very well versed in, Gaudiya philosophy. So, and not just Gaudiya philosophy, but in many other philosophies also. And so he was teaching Narottama, and he was teaching Srinivas, and he was teaching Shyamananda the Bhakti Shastras. And Narottama was just excelling in his studies. He was extremely studious. He was just very quickly mastered all of the Bhakti Shastras, the Sandarbhas, and the works of the Goswamis, Rupa, Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. And all the while, Jiva Goswami was petitioning Lokanath Goswami, okay, can you please initiate him? Can you please initiate him? And Lokanath just kept refusing. And Narottama was getting more and more discouraged. At this point, like a year had passed. Narottama was, 13 or 14 at this time. And he was becoming discouraged. And, Jiva Goswami reassured him, don't worry, Mahaprabhu has a plan. Whatever Mahaprabhu says, doesn't go in vain. He was reassuring him like this. So, at Jiva Goswami's behest, Narottama decided that he wanted to do some service. He thought that to obtain the mercy of Lokanath Goswami, that he could most effectively do that by doing some kind of service for him. So what he started doing, it's a very famous narration, he started to clean the place where, Lokanath Goswami would relieve himself. And he would, clean it very nicely, very thoroughly. He would put fresh sand, and like this, he would clean it very nicely. And this went on for some time. This went on for about another year that Narottama was doing the service for Lokanath Goswami. And Lokanath Goswami was a very humble person. That's why he didn't want to take any disciples. That's why he when Krishnadas Kaviraj was writing or taking the blessings of Lokanath Goswami to write Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lokanath mentioned, he said, go ahead, but don't mention me. And so there's only like one or two mentions of Lokanath Goswami's name in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he's a very humble person. That was his mood. And, or I should say especially, his mood was especially humble. Not that other Vaishnavas weren't humble, but he especially exhibited humility. And so, he was wondering, who's serving me like this? How can, And so anyway, it went on for some time. And then eventually Lokanath decided that he would go early to his spot to, see if he could see what was going on, see who was doing this. And he came there, and it was dark, and Narottama was there. Or rather, he saw somebody there. He didn't know it was Narottama, but he said, who's there? What are you doing here? And Narottama, of course, knowing that he'd been caught, he came out and he said, it's your servant Narottama Das, and I'm just doing, some service to you. And he broke down, actually. He cried and he fell at Lokanath Goswami's feet. He said, I'm trying to, I need to get your mercy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told me to take shelter of you. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You're refusing to initiate me. And so Lokanath, seeing his determination that he was doing the service for so long, and still he had such intense feelings, for him and wanting to be initiated by him, he relented. He said, okay, fine, I'll initiate you. He said, later this morning, come to the bank of the Yamuna and we'll conduct the ceremony. So Narottama, informed all the devotees, and Jiva Goswami, Shyamananda, they all came there. And significantly, this initiation ceremony which happened was the first initiation according to the rules which Sanatana Goswami laid out in Hari Bhakti Vilas. So it was the first initiation according to that vidhi. So Narottama, became initiated by Lokanath Goswami. He gave him the holy name. He gave him, his, Diksha mantras like this. And so then Narottama very enthusiastically engaged in bhajan there in Vrindavan. There's one very famous incident, significant incident with him, where he was performing bhajan, and Radharani, being so pleased with his bhajan, appeared before him and told him that his name was Vilasa Mandri. He told him his form, and he said, or she said, listen, every night we go and we meet with Krishna and we offer him these milk sweets. So go and learn from this Sakhi, how to make these milk sweets, how to boil the milk and make these milk sweets. So Narottama, this is all Manasa Seva. He did this Manasa Seva, and where he started boiling milk so that the Sakhis could offer to Krishna in the evenings. And one day he was doing his service, and he saw that the milk was boiling over. And so, of course, being afraid of his service being ruined or being done improperly, he grabbed the pot with both hands, and of course the pot was extremely hot. So his hands were burned very bad, and he felt, of course, great pain. And so his meditation was broken, and when he came to, he realized that his hands were actually burned very badly. And being afraid of devotees asking, how did this happen, what happened, he just covered them with bandages and just kind of went about his business, tried to hide his injuries. So Jiva Goswami one day saw the burns on his hand and asked him, what's going on, and Narottama had no real choice but to explain it to him. And so, hearing this, the elevated nature of Narottama's bhajan, Jiva Goswami gave him the title Thakur Mahashaya. So therefore, he's known as Narottama Das Thakur Mahashaya. He's also just known as Thakur Mahashaya, but that's also just why we call him also sometimes Narottama Das Thakur. That comes from Jiva Goswami. So he gave him that name. Near that time, he also gave Srinivas the name Acharya, his pupil Srinivas. Srinivas Acharya and Narottama Das Thakur were very close friends. They met through Lokanath Goswami. One day they both went to go see Lokanath Goswami. And Lokanath asked Srinivas, Because Srinivas, actually, when Narottama first came to Vrindavan, Srinivas also received a vision, so to speak, and was told that this great devotee Narottama has entered Vrindavan, and you should associate with him. So they both went to go meet Lokanath Goswami somehow or other at the same time, or not somehow or other, but by the arrangement of Krishna. They went there at the same time, and Lokanath asked Srinivas Acharya, he said, "You know who this person is?" And Srinivas said, "Yes, I know who this person is. This person is Narottama. He's the son of the king of Kaituri, and his association is my life." So from then on, they became very close, very, very intimate associates. And they, engaged in bhajan there in Vrindavan. They also traveled to different holy places together in Vrindavan. There's one pastime where they were in Govardhan, and they had darshan of Krishna in a cave in Govardhan. So they were very intimate associates. At that time, it was Kartik, and Jiva Goswami wanted to arrange a festival so that all the Vaishnavas in Vrindavan could associate. So he called all these, different, very saintly people, these mahants, and organized this big festival for Kartik. And in front of the assembly of people there at that festival, all these great souls, he announced that the time had come to distribute the literatures that the Goswamis had written all over India, and especially to Bengal and Orissa, because the devotees there were many Gaudiya Vaishnavas there, and not all of them had read these literatures. So he specifically extolled the glories of Srinivas Acharya, Narottama Dasa-Thakur, and Shyamananda Pandit, his foremost pupils. And he said that I feel that these are the people who are most qualified to do this. They're young, and they have strength and knowledge, so that they could accomplish this. And taking permission from their gurus, he arranged for their departure. He called one rich devotee who was living in Mathura and arranged a cart, and all the books had been copied, and Jiva Goswami is described was personally loading the books into the cart. At which time he called Narottama and Shyamananda, and he told Shyamananda, that you should treat Narottama exactly how you treat me. And then he told Narottama that you should take care of Shyamananda very carefully. So Shyamananda was put under the shelter of Narottama. Not as a guru, but just, as a shiksha guru or as a guide. And then later, also, just before their departure, Lokanath Goswami called Narottama and Srinivas, and he told Srinivas that you should take care of Narottama very nicely, and he told Narottama to stay under the shelter of Srinivas. So in that way, Srinivas kind of became the leader of the party, because Srinivas, or Narottama, Shyamananda was under Narottama, and Narottama was under Srinivas, so Srinivas was the senior most Vaishnava in that party. So, like this, after taking the blessings of Govindadev, they departed for Bengal. And they traveled for some time. They had some things that went on in their travels. When they reached Bengal, there was this king who is the king of a village called Vishnupur. Sometimes it's narrated Vanavishnupur. And he had this astrologer who would be able to tell when valuable goods were coming through that area. And he would send a group of dacoits to go, scope it out and then to take whatever valuable goods were there. So he sent a group of dacoits. They noticed that there were about 15 men traveling with this party. And his astrologer told him that they were carrying jewels, that they were carrying very valuable jewels. And so he sent 200 dacoits to steal these carts. They stole the whole thing. And so they brought these carts back to Vanavishnupur, and upon, looking at the contents of the carts, they realized that it's just books. And at that point, this king's name was Birhambir. So Birhambir was, a little bit bewildered. He was a little bit wary because, he wanted jewels, he wanted money. He didn't want to hurt anybody else. And he had specifically also instructed the dacoits, go there but don't kill anyone. Just steal it and. And so he asked the dacoits, where is this party coming from? They told him they was coming from Vrindavan. And he realized, oh man, that he had probably stolen books from, very saintly people. And he felt very bad. And so he told the guards, don't speak anything of this. You take these carts, put them in this, inner chamber, and let's see what happens. Srinivasacharya, being the leader of the group, wherever they would stop, he was the one staying awake and making sure that, the books were guarded. So that night, he had fallen asleep, and so the books were stolen, and all the devotees woke up and realized that this horrible thing had happened. And so they were frantically searching. They were all around this village that they were in, which was near Vanavishnupur. They were searching all around, asking people, but nothing came up. They didn't turn up anything. And so they were very, dismayed, and they wrote a letter to Vrindavan. Srinivasacharya wrote a letter to Vrindavan, to Jiva Goswami, saying, telling what had happened. And then he told Narottama and Shyamananda, he said, listen, I was supposed to stay awake, so I'll find these books. And you two, they were near K3. So he said, you two both go to K3. Narottama, you can see your parents. And Shyamananda, you go with him. And then after that, you go to Orissa. So they both went. And they, arrived in K3. By that time, news had gotten to Vrindavan that these books were stolen. And all the devotees were extremely distraught. In fact, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was so distraught that he left his body. That was the disappearance of Krishnadas Kaviraj. And so, anyway, Narottama and Shyamananda then arrived there in K3, and Shyamananda stayed there for some days, and he took instruction. Narottama taught Shyamananda, and then Shyamananda eventually left. During this time, waiting, in between Shyamananda's departure and the return of the books, Narottama went on pilgrimage to Jagannath Puri. He went on pilgrimage to Navadvip. In Navadvip, he met Ishan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's servant, or Shachimata's servant. He also met Shuklambara Brahmachari. There's a whole really nice narration of him in Shachimata's home, meeting Ishan. Ishan was very old, and he was just, it was just him there. Shachimata wasn't there, she had left, and he was just very old and decrepit, and it's very ecstatic narration. All these different places he had darshan of the Lord. And he came back and received a letter from Lokanath Goswami that he should establish a temple in K3. So at this time also, he'd received another letter from Srinivas saying that the books had been found. That's a whole other narration. It's not directly related to this, so I won't say it here. It's also quite long. But Srinivas had found the books. Lokanath Goswami wanted there to be a temple in K3. Oh, also Srinivas had told him that he was near K3 and he was going to come there. So he went there, he came there, and Narottama got the idea for this temple establishment that he wanted to have a big, big festival and invite not only the devotees from East Bengal, but from West Bengal, from Orissa, invite everyone. Have everybody come there to K3 and have this big, big festival and install deities there. And so Srinivas thought that was a very good idea. And they invited all kinds of different Vaishnavas. Notably, Janava Mata came. And at that festival, this K3 festival was an extremely important or crucial point in our Sampradaya's history. At that point, Janava Mata was established as the Acharya of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And also, of course, these deities in K3 were installed. And There was also many philosophical discussions between the Vaishnavas there. Everybody was basically in one place, so that they all got together and they discussed, especially based on the writings of the Goswamis, which were there because Srinivasacharya had come with the books. So they all discussed and they read these books, and they kind of very systematically codified or solidified the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and what it means to be a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu based on the literatures of the Goswamis. So it was a very important part, or of our Sampradaya's history. Practically, one of the most. It was integral, completely, very, very important. At that time, also Narottama introduced a new style of kirtan that he had invented, which is basically kind of the style of kirtan that we follow here. For those of you who've learned Mridanga, sometimes in some books it's described how the Mridanga mantras that we learn are coming in parampara from Narottama Dasa-Thakur. So he had also written a number of bhajans by then, and he was singing these bhajans and doing this kirtan. And it was a very elaborate festival. Janava Mata cooked for everyone. And so it was a very, amazing, elaborate festival. And over the course of organizing that festival, Srinivasacharya, he had come with one disciple named Ramchandra Kaviraj. He had two disciples, Ramchandra Kaviraj and Govinda Kaviraj. They were brothers. But Narottama had, and Ramchandra Kaviraj had developed a very close friendship over the course of organizing this festival. And when the festival was over, Ramchandra decided to stay. And so they stayed there together and, did bhajan and associated and preached in Khetri together. It's also described that they became two bodies. They were two bodies, but they became one soul. They were that close, like that. So they were very, very intimate associates. At that time, Narottama made some disciples, notably Hariram and Ramakrishna, who were two brothers. A lot of the preaching that Narottama Dasa-Thakur did was against Smarta Brahmanas, because he was a Kayastha. He was technically a Shudra, but he was initiating people from Brahmana families. So Hariram and Ramakrishna, their father, at one time sent some pundits, and a lot of his preaching was through his disciples. So Hariram and Ramakrishna, based on what they had learned from Narottama, defeated these pundits. They had also defeated one Smarta named Ganga Narayana Chakravarti, who was like one of the main scholars there in that area. So Ganga Narayan Chakravarti also took shelter of Narottama Dasa-Thakur. So these three were his main disciples, Hariram, Ramakrishna, and Ganga Narayana Chakravarti. Another notable instance, there was one king, Raja Narasimha, from a neighboring village, and he had heard, that this Narottama, this Kayastha, was initiating Brahmanas, and he said, what's this nonsense? And so he sent a kind of a gang of pundits to defeat him. Narottama caught, wind of this, and so did his disciples. So Hariram and Ramakrishna, they went to this neighboring village, which was between Raj Narasimha's village and Khetri. And they had disguised themselves as one of them was a panwala, and the other one was a potter. He's selling pots. So they had their little shops there, and these, pundits had stopped in this village. One of these pundits was, and the leader amongst them was Rupa Narayana, who was the one who had tried to, or who was defeated by Jiva Goswami, but who had tried to debate Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. So he was amongst them. And so, they went there and they were, going to get some pan, and, they were just like looking around the marketplace. And so they asked, this panwala, what are your prices? And this is Hariram. And Hariram answered in fluent Sanskrit. And this panwala speaking Sanskrit, what kind of village is this? And then they went and they met Ramakrishna, and they were asking Ramakrishna about this and that. And Ramakrishna also, he responded in, fluent Sanskrit. And they were thinking, what is going on here, It's a very strange village that the panwalas and the potters are speaking in Sanskrit. So they asked, these two, who is your guru? Who are you disciples of? And they said, we're disciples of Narottama Das Thakur Mahashaya. So they said, oh, really? Well, that's very interesting. And then so they kind of, broached the question, well, he's a Kayastha and this and that. And so they had this debate. And Hari Ram and Ramakrishna completely defeated them. Just both of them, just completely, wiped the floor with these supposedly big Panditjis. And so being defeated there, they went to Khetri not to debate Narottama Das Thakur, but actually to surrender to him. And so Rupa Narayana, the Digvijayi, who was not the Digvijayi who met Mahaprabhu, but the Digvijayi who had met Rupa and Sanatan and was defeated by Jiva Goswami, then surrendered to Narottama Das Thakur Mahashaya. So in this way, some of the preaching activities of Narottama Das Thakur, at that point, this was very, this was later in his life. He was getting old. And he was there with, Ramchandra Kaviraj, and they were doing bhajan. But at this point, his fame had spread all over Bengal. And, he saying to Ramchandra Kaviraj, he said, we've been here in Khetri for so many years together, but now everything's changed. There's so many people coming here, and they all want this and that. So how about you and me go to Gambila? Gambila is like a forest area just outside of Khetri. So Ramchandra Kaviraj, assented, and they both went. So, they had done bhajan together, they had preached together, and now they were essentially retiring together. The Ramchandra and Narottama were completely inseparable. They had a very, extremely strong bond. So they were there, doing bhajan in Gambila in the forest, and Ganga Narayana Chakravarti was serving Narottama, Hari Ram and Ramakrishna also. But it seems like Ganga Narayan Chakravarti was the main personal servant of Narottama Das Thakur. So they were there, and once a letter came in. This is after several years. After several years of Ramchandra and Narottama being together, he had received a letter. Narottama had received a letter from Srinivasacharya, who he had not heard from for a very, very long time. So in the letter, he was saying, listen, I'm in Bengal now, but I'm on my way to Vrindavan. But listen, I'm very old. I'm very old now, and I'd like my disciple Ramchandra to accompany me to Vrindavan. This was, of course, extremely devastating to both of them. They had such an intimate bond. They'd been together every moment of their lives practically for the last several years. And so Ramchandra, he begged Narottama, he said, please come with me. He said, I can't be separate from you. How will I live? And Narottama said, I can't go with you. I'm first of all, I'm old, and my body's decrepit. I can barely, do this or that. How am I going to go all the way to Vrindavan with you? And also, being in Vrindavan would just be too painful for me because my guru is gone now. The Goswamis are gone, and I just couldn't handle it. I'd give up my life. So, with great sorrow, they separated. And after this was kind of a turning point in Narottama Das Thakur's life, that after this, he spent most of his days just absorbed in sadness. He was crying and, just lamenting. At this time also, he wrote that bhajan that we sang earlier, Jayanilo. At that time, he wrote that bhajan in separation because he was just feeling so much separation. That was his mood. He wrote that bhajan, Jayanilo. My understanding is he also at that time wrote E Baro Koruna Koro, Vaishnava Goshai, begging for please give me just one drop of mercy. He wrote that about Ramchandra Kaviraj. And at that time, I think it seems like he also wrote Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, because at the end of that song, he says, Ramachandra Sangamage Narottama Das. So he's begging for the association of Ramchandra Kaviraj. So he wrote especially bhajans at that time, which were centered around the Vaishnavas and separation from the Vaishnavas, because that's what he was absorbed in. One day, and we're getting to the end here, one day he was bathing in the Padmavati there in Gambila, outside of Khetri. And there were some Smarta Brahmanas there. And, Narottama was always he was constantly at this point absorbed in crying and chanting like this. He was exhibiting symptoms like that. Very little external consciousness was there. Some was there, but he was he was very absorbed in this transcendental depression, so to speak. And so these smarta brahmanas, saw him there like, what's this guy doing? He's just crying and chanting all the time, If he wants to get over his misery, then he should, just become absorbed in Brahman and all these things. They made fun of him, and they kind of jeered at him a little bit. At that time, Narottama just, he wasn't very much concerned with this world at all. And so he just laid down on the ground, and he gave up all external. It looked like he was, that it looked like he had left. And so Ganganarayana Chakravarti and the other, disciples, they were, thinking, what's going on? And they were thinking that this was it. And then eventually, he kind of came to his senses and told Ganganarayana, he said, listen, I don't want to be here anymore. Take me back to K3. And, what it was is that Ganganarayana was feared for Narottama's, health and his life. And so he said, let's go back to K3 and, you can do bhajan there. They went back. Narottama stayed there for some time. But one day he approached Ganganarayana and he said, today I want to take darshan of Mahaprabhu in the temple, and then I want to go back to Gambila. And Ganganarayana was, wondering what's going on. He was in a very somber mood, very different mood. He was kind of, a little bit aloof, and wasn't really speaking much. And so, Hari Ram and Ramakrishna and Ganganarayana Chakravarti, they were kind of, wondering what's going on. So they asked him, they said, well, listen, last time you went there, you almost left, so, and he said, anyway, I want to go. That's what I want to do, so let's go. So they went to the temple and they took darshan of Mahaprabhu, and Narottama offered some silent prayers. And again, the devotees were talking amongst themselves, what's going on, what's this mood that our guru's in. And so they got to Gambila, and at that time Narottama wanted to take a bath, when he got there. And so he, went there into the Padmavati, and he asked Ganganarayana to massage him. And so he was massaging him, and he ordered, the devotees, whoever was there, to start kirtan. And so they started chanting, they started, And then as Ganganarayana was massaging him, he realized that there was this white substance, kind of pooling around, they were in the water, but that there was this kind of like white substance, kind of around Narottama. And he was wondering, what is this? And so he stopped massaging, and he's kind of, bewildered. And Narottama told him, keep going. Meanwhile, this kirtan's going on. He told him, keep massaging. And he's massaging, and he's realizing that this white substance, which was milk, was actually coming from the body of Narottama. And he realized that his spiritual master was leaving. He realized that Narottama was performing his disappearance pastimes. And so he stopped, and he cried and he begged Narottama. He said, please don't go, please don't leave. It's not the time. There's still so much to do. And Narottama very stoically told him, just keep massaging. And so he massaged him, and eventually he melted or dissolved into milk in the Padmavati River. And so they took that milk and they put it into samadhi, and that is there in the courtyard of the Radha Gokulananda temple in Vrindavan. So that is something about the life of Narottama Dasa-Thakur. Narottama Dasa-Thakur Mahashaya Ki Jai. If there's any comments, additions, anything I missed in that regard. Yes?
We went to go see his parents. What was his hometown again?
Katuri.
What happened there?
Well, his parents were very happy to see him, and they actually it's described that they told him that since you've been gone. Well, they were happy to see him. They were extremely delighted to see him because they didn't think they'd ever see him again. But he showed up again just wearing like a kopin and a chadar, and he had his, he had a bead bag, and he was covered in dust from traveling, and he's, emaciated. And so they said, they were happy to see him, but they were kind of aghast at his appearance. But they told him that, listen, since you've been gone, we, allowed your brother to rule Khetri. But hey, listen, if you're back now and if you want to take it over, don't worry, we can, he's willing to, give it up. And he said, no, don't worry about that. Otherwise, I don't know much else, but that I do know. That was Prabhu.
I believe that same festival that they had, the big one, I think that's the same festival that the it was so fired up that the Panchatattva appeared and everybody was
appear,
dancing with him. That was nice.
Anything more? Mataji's, anything? Oh, David?
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to ask, do I remember correctly that when he was already in that sorrowful mood in Gambila, and there was this person who said he didn't really understand why he's lamenting so much and should think about Brahman. Wasn't that past time when Narottama was also saying that I don't want to see you, or he sent him away, or was it another this different pastime? I think it might be a different personality.
I'm not remembering now. It could be. I do remember something like that. I'm not remembering exactly now.
It might be a different personality.
Yeah.
It is similar.
That was his disciple. I don't remember which personality said that, but that was his disciple.
Oh, you know who that was? That was
Madhavendra
Puri. Yeah.
Yeah. It just, I was confused.
That was Madhavendra Puri with Ramchandra Puri. When Ishvara Puri was leaving. No. When what was his name? Madhavendra Puri's guru. No. Sorry. When Madhavendra Puri was leaving, Ishvara Puri, and it was between Ishvara Puri and Ramchandra Puri. So Madhavendra Puri told Ramchandra Puri, get out of here. I don't want to see you like this. Yeah. Okay, that's what it was. And Ishvara Puri also rejected him. Yes, Mataji.
I was just thinking, these are really intimate pastimes, so, how do we have access to this? Was it various records that were given? Was it one person who got this information?
Well, there's different records of Narottama Dasa-Thakur's life. One of them is in Bhakti Ratnakara, one of them is in one book called Prema Vilas, and one of them is in a book called Narottama Vilas. Narottama Vilas was written by one Narhari Sarkar Thakur. Prema Vilas was written by Nityananda Das, who was a disciple of Janava Mata. So these were people who were, how exactly they got this information, I'm not sure. Some of it surely was revealed. Definitely, probably some of his disciples, spoke these things and spoke these pastimes, to others. And then eventually there was probably some kind of oral tradition, and then eventually it was written down. How exactly, a lot of this information is there, I'm not sure. But I mean, surely it comes from devotees who were there. And again, some of it was probably revealed, just like other things, like, Krishnadas Kaviraj. Of course, Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita from the notes of, Raghunath Das Goswami and Swarup Damodar Goswami and Murari Gupta for the early pastimes. But some of it was also just revealed to him. Some of these things just, came. So with other acharyas that happens too. So I wouldn't doubt that some of this is that. But I mean, a lot of this, for a lot of these things, it's stuff about his family life. There was a lot of people around, and stuff with his disciples. Again, there's a lot of people around. So yeah, surely it's coming from them. At least I would think. Yes, Mataji.
I don't want to be too controversial, so I won't say like the name or anything. But
Okay.
if my memory serves me properly, I've heard from Bhakti Vikas Maharaj that there's a publication on like the life on Narottama Dasa-Thakur. But my memory is quite hazy on why Maharaj says it's bogus again, because I know I've heard like ISKCON devotees themselves recite from it. So if you could just remind me, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly why he said that. I can speculate because I've read that book. There's a lot of things in that book which are additions, kind of in the vein, like if you read Prabhupada Lilamrita, there's, things like Abai looked out of the window of the train and, saw the birds, saw the cities passing by, and he was thinking, and he, looked up and he heard birds chirping, and so it's like things like that. It's like, okay, maybe that's there. Maybe he did look up and saw, this and that. But there are, it's embellished a little bit to make it readable. So in this book, also, there's things like that. So, and also just like based on this devotee who wrote this book based it on these other books. But from what I've read, I've read the accounts of Narottama Das Thakur's life in that publication and also in the original books. And there are, differences. There are some differences in how things are narrated. So that's, something I can think of. I don't know, you'd have to ask him. I'm not sure exactly why he said that, but I would assume it's something like that. Yeah. There's only one, The Glorious Life of Narottama Das Thakur. Yeah, it's a red book. Sorry if Sheetala Mataji's watching this, I'm very sorry. But I doubt she does. But anyhow, yeah, that's all I can think of. I'm not sure exactly. I'm sure he has more elaborate reasons than that. But yes, we're out of time. So again, Srila Narottama Das Thakur Mahashaya Ki Jai.